What would you say is the best sort of strategy to get into property investing, especially after a time like now?
I think there are many different property investment strategies. It very much, I always say to my mentees, you have to look at how much time you have on your hands, and how much money. Those are the two things that dictate what you can do.
Mm,
Often, particularly if you're young, you're just fresh out of uni or just started your first job, you probably have more time but not as much money. So there are certain strategies. There's a particular strategy that I've used in the past. It's called rent to rent, essentially where you rent a property from a landlord as a single building, as a whole, and then you sublet the rooms within the property, um, and then your difference, essentially the difference between what you're paying the landlord as a monthly rent and what you're receiving from the tenants, that's your kind of profit.
yeah.
And there's a lot of people that do that strategy very successfully and have created a business out of it. And the great thing about that is you don't need to own the property. You're essentially controlling and managing the property, um, and on behalf of the landlord, essentially. So that you wouldn't even need that much money. I'd say the ones that I had, I didn't need any money because
Wow.
I was able to negotiate with the landlord a rent-free period. But in some cases, I'd say you could start a rent to rent, depending on where you're based in the country.
Mm,
You could probably do it from anywhere between 3 to 5 grand. 5 grand is comfortable.
yeah.
And when you compare that to how much a deposit would be for a buy-to-let property, that
Mm,
is considerably less. So it's what we call an easier entry barrier
mm,
strategy. If your goal is, so I'd say rent to rent is really good if your goal is cash flow
yeah.
and you just want like quick money.
Mm,
If you're investing for the long term, you're probably going to want to be looking more towards buy-to-lets, which you're going to require a lot more capital up front. So typically, for a buy-to-let, you'd need about 25% deposit
they
for a
recently
mortgage.
raised it from, I think it was 10 or 15%, wasn't it?
So 10 or 15% if you're buying your home to live in.
Okay.
But if you're buying a property as a buy-to-let, as an investment, you would need a minimum of 25%.
That's significantly higher, isn't it? Yeah.
Exactly. Depending on where you're investing. So my buy-to-lets are in Nottingham,
Wow.
and up there you can get a two-bed property for under 100k.
Oh, no.
I bought mine a few years ago, and I paid 69 grand.
Was that your
Now
deposit? Or
that was the whole house.
you're not finding
So,
that in London at all.
exactly. In London, that 69 grand is probably a deposit
Yeah.
rather than
Yeah.
rather than the whole property. So when you're looking at investing, ask yourself, how much time do you have? What is your end goal? What's your long-term view? Do you want just quick cash flow, or are you trying to invest for the long term, create that sort of generational wealth?
Mm,
There are different strategies that will suit whatever it is that you're looking for.
yeah. And back to just to quickly touch on the subletting thing you said. I was talking to my cousin today, and he was telling me that the few areas where subletting is illegal or you're not allowed to do it. So
Yeah.
how would what do you know what those areas are, and how would you try and get around that?
So subletting has got to the general public, has a very negative connotation around it. People hear subletting and immediately think illegal,
Mm,
when in reality, subletting is a practice that's done in property, through both commercial and residential property. The only time subletting is completely illegal is when you're doing it without consent from the landowner.
okay.
Or so you have to, when you approach a landlord and you want to take on their property using the rent to rent strategy, you have to declare it. You have to say, I'm looking to rent the property off of you. I will then be reletting the rooms to other tenants. And if you can get consent from the landlord, and consent from the landlord needs to make sure their mortgage lender and their insurances,
Mm,
whoever's insuring the property, is okay with that, then it's all above board, and you can sign contracts that state very clearly what you're doing with the property,
yeah.
and then you can get started.